When you understand that talking to God is not a ritual but a lifeline, you begin to see your entire financial world shift. You stop seeing bills as threats and start seeing them as reminders that God is about to move. Every time you speak to Him, you are not just praying, you are activating a divine system that never fails, never delays, and never miscalculates. What seems overwhelming to you is simple for Him, and what seems heavy for your hands is light in His. Talking to God becomes the place where burdens turn into breakthroughs and pressure turns into peace. There comes a moment when you realize that no bill can rise higher than the one who owns all resources. God is never intimidated by numbers, dates, or deadlines, and when you bring your concerns to Him, you enter a place of assurance that cannot be shaken. Your bills may have a due date, but God has no limits. Your resources may run low, but His storehouse never empties. When you talk to Him, you step into a realm where lack loses its power and divine supply begins to overflow. Fear often rises when bills pile up, but faith rises when you speak to God. Talking to Him shifts your inner atmosphere. It quiets anxiety and awakens boldness. Instead of waking up scared of what's due, you start waking up expecting something good to happen. You begin to understand that God listens, responds, and moves when you call. Your trust grows stronger, your spirit grows braver, and your heart grows calmer every time you speak to Him about your needs. There is a supernatural alignment that takes place when your voice meets God's promise. You don't beg for help, you stand in your identity as someone God deeply cares for. You don't talk from a place of weakness. You speak from a place of covenant and confidence. When you present your bills before God, you present them to the one who has already prepared the solution. And as you keep talking to Him, something powerful happens inside you. Fear loosens its grip and faith tightens its hold. Financial challenges often appear as mountains, but mountains crumble when God enters the situation. When you talk to Him, you are not just asking, you are inviting Him into every detail of your life. You begin to see unexpected opportunities, open doors, favor with people, and miracles in places you didn't expect. What once felt impossible becomes manageable, and what once felt heavy becomes light, because you are no longer carrying it alone. Your problems are never signs of abandonment. They are signs that God is ready to demonstrate His faithfulness. When you talk to Him, you remind yourself that your future is secure, your needs are seen, and your help is guaranteed. You shift from wondering, how will I pay this, to declaring God will make a way. Your mind moves from confusion to clarity, and your heart moves from pressure to peace. Many times, bills don't steal your money, they steal your peace. But when you talk to God, they lose their power to intimidate you. You begin to look at them with confidence instead of fear. You read them with faith instead of frustration. You understand that every need has already been supplied in the spiritual realm, and your job is simply to align your words, your faith, and your expectations with what God has already prepared. Prayer becomes more than a moment. It becomes your strategy. You don't wait for emergencies to talk to God. You stay connected so that when pressure comes, you are already standing in strength. You walk with assurance, knowing that the one who guided you yesterday will provide again today. Your consistency in talking to Him builds a foundation that cannot be shaken, even when your circumstances try to shake you. When you talk to God about your bills, you are not reminding Him, you are reminding yourself that nothing in your life is beyond His reach. You step into a mindset where you stop doubting and start declaring. You speak with authority, believing that solutions are already being released. The more you talk to Him, the more aligned your heart becomes with His promises. The more you call on Him, the more you experience His provision. And in this continuous conversation with God, your faith matures, your confidence grows, and your fear loses its strength. You begin to walk with the inner conviction that no bill, no demand, and no pressure can overcome a person who talks to God. When you finally understand that your bills are not giants but reminders of the God who walks with you, something shifts deep inside your spirit. You stop magnifying the numbers on paper and start magnifying the one who holds the universe in His hands. What once looked impossible begins to look small in comparison to the greatness of the one who never fails His people. You begin to breathe easier, think clearer, and stand taller because you know that nothing you face is bigger than the God who stands for you. There comes a moment when the weight of responsibility tries to press down on your shoulders, but your faith rises and whispers, God is bigger. You may look at the due dates, the rising expenses, the unexpected demands. But even in the middle of it all, you feel a stillness reminding you that heaven's supply is not limited by earthly numbers. You realize that the size of your bills doesn't measure the size of your destiny. The pressure you feel today cannot shrink the promises God has planned for you. Every time a bill arrives, it carries two messages. Fear delivers one, faith delivers the other. Fear says, you don't have enough. But faith says, God will always make a way. Fear shows you the total, but faith shows you the provider. When you choose to listen to the voice of faith, you begin to walk in a confidence the world cannot understand. You start believing that even if the numbers rise, God's supply rises higher. Even if the demands increase, God's ability increases greater. There is a powerful peace that comes when you realize that your bills might surprise you, but they never surprise God. He already knows what you need before you even open the envelope. He already has the plan before you even feel the pressure. He already has the solution before the problem even appeared. When you understand this, you stop reacting in fear and start responding in trust, because you know your situation is never out of His reach. You begin to see that bills are temporary, but God's provision is constant. Financial challenges come and go, but His faithfulness does not fluctuate with the economy. His resources are not affected by market changes, shortages, inflation, or personal setbacks. When one door closes, He opens another. When a resource dries up, He releases a new one. When a method fails, He creates a fresh path for you to walk through. Nothing you face is beyond His ability to restore, multiply, or replace. Your confidence grows when you realize that God's role is to provide and your role is to trust. You don't have to figure out every detail. You don't have to calculate every number. You don't have to understand how everything will come together. All you need to do is believe that the one who has never abandoned you is not about to start now. This belief becomes your strength, your anchor, and your source of calm in every financial storm. As you deepen your trust, you begin to look at your bills not with fear but with expectation. You start seeing them as opportunities for God to show you something you've never seen before. You understand that every financial challenge carries a hidden blessing sometimes. It's growth, sometimes it's wisdom, sometimes it's a miracle waiting to unfold. But whatever it is, it reminds you that God always steps into the details of your life with perfect timing. In moments where the numbers look too high, you remind yourself that God is higher. In moments where the deadlines look too close, you remind yourself that God is closer. In moments where you feel overwhelmed, you remind yourself that God is over all. These reminders anchor your spirit and keep your heart steady, because you know that nothing in your life is too great for the one who created everything from nothing. Your perspective changes when you stop staring at the problem and start focusing on the provider. You realize that worry does not pay bills, faith does. Stress does not bring answers, prayer does. Panic does not open doors, trust does. The moment you shift your attention back to God, you begin to see options, directions, and possibilities you couldn't see before. What once felt threatening becomes manageable, because you see it through the lens of His power instead of your limitation. And day by day, as you keep trusting, you begin to live with a quiet assurance that your bills may come, but they will never be bigger than your God. When fear tries to rise inside you, it often begins with the sight of a bill, a deadline, or a demand that feels too heavy. But the moment you turn your heart toward God, that fear begins to lose its power. You shift from focusing on what you lack to focusing on the one who lacks nothing. The atmosphere inside you changes. Your thoughts slow down. Your breathing steadies. You start to feel a quiet strength that wasn't there a moment before. Talking to God becomes the key that unlocks a deeper confidence you didn't know you had. There is something powerful that happens when you allow faith to interrupt fear. Fear says you won't make it, but faith says you already have a provider. Fear tells you that the numbers won't align, but faith tells you that God is still in control of the outcome. Fear magnifies the problem, but faith magnifies the one who can solve it. As you keep talking to God, you begin to recognize that fear is only loud when faith is silent. And the moment faith begins to speak, fear begins to crumble. Each prayer becomes a reminder that you are not handling life alone. You feel less burdened because you know God is listening. You feel less stressed because you know He is working. You feel less overwhelmed because you know His plan is bigger than your pressure. You don't need all the answers when you pray. You simply need to trust the one who has them. This trust gives you a courage that rises above the noise of worry and the weight of financial uncertainty. Even when the situation doesn't change immediately. Something inside you does. The anxiety that once controlled your emotions begins to loosen its grip. The doubts that once clouded your vision begin to clear. You start to see possibilities instead of problems. You begin to believe that solutions exist even before they show up. Talking to God opens a doorway for hope to enter places where fear once lived. You realize that faith is not just a feeling, it is a choice. It is choosing to believe that God will provide even when you don't see the provision yet. It is choosing to stand firm even when circumstances shake. It is choosing to trust His timing instead of panicking over deadlines. Each time you talk to Him, you strengthen that choice, and your courage becomes more rooted in His faithfulness than in your own ability to handle everything. There will be moments when fear tries to return, but each time it does, your faith grows faster than it. You start speaking promises instead of problems. You start praying boldly instead of worrying quietly. You start waking up with hope instead of dread. The same situation that once intimidated you now becomes the very place where God builds your spiritual backbone. The shift from fear to faith is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's gentle, sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it's simply a whisper in your heart that says, God will take care of this. That whisper carries more power than 1,000 anxious thoughts. It anchors you, steadies you, and reminds you that even when life is uncertain, God is not. As you continue talking to God, you start to recognize His presence in every detail. You notice small provisions that you previously overlooked. You notice unexpected help that arrives at just the right moment. You notice that the things you feared never had the power you thought they did. Fear becomes smaller each time you see how faithful God remains. Your faith begins to shape your attitude. You stop reacting from panic and start responding with wisdom. You stop making decisions based on fear and start making them based on clarity. You stop feeling defeated and start feeling equipped. The more you talk to God, the more you realize that fear may knock at the door, but faith is the one who answers. And in this continuous process of choosing faith over fear, your spirit becomes grounded, your mind becomes stronger, and your heart becomes convinced that no matter what comes into your hands, it can never be bigger than the God who holds your life. When you begin to understand that your voice joined with God's promise creates a powerful alignment, something inside you shifts. You stop approaching prayer as a last resort and start approaching it as your first and strongest strategy. You don't come before God defeated, you come before Him as someone who knows they belong to Him. You realize that presenting your needs to God is not an act of desperation, it is an act of authority, reminding your spirit that heaven is backing you even when the world feels heavy. There is a deep strength that rises when you no longer pray from fear, but from identity. You don't say, God, help me because I'm failing, but rather, God, I come to you because I am yours. That shift in posture changes everything. It removes the trembling from your voice and replaces it with confidence. It takes your eyes off the problem and refocuses them on the promise. It reminds you that you are not an outsider begging. You are a child approaching a father who loves to take care of his own. As you speak to God, your words become seeds planted in the soil of faith. You may not see the harvest immediately, but you trust that something is happening beneath the surface. You trust that God is moving in ways you cannot see. You trust that solutions are unfolding behind the scenes. This trust creates peace. And this peace becomes the strength you stand on while waiting for breakthrough. Every time you talk to God, you are releasing pressure from your spirit. You are transferring the weight from your shoulders to His hands. You stop carrying what was never meant for you to carry. You stop trying to solve what only He can solve. This exchange is where your peace grows. This exchange is where your faith deepens. This exchange is where your confidence awakens. Because you know God takes your concerns seriously. Sometimes you pray and feel nothing change around you, but something always changes within you. Maybe you become calmer, maybe you feel clearer, maybe your hope strengthens, or maybe your courage rises. These inner changes are signs that your prayer is working. They show you that the conversation between you and God is shaping your spirit, preparing you for the provision that is on its way. When you talk to God from a place of confidence, you begin to see your needs differently. Instead of panicking over what you lack, you start thanking Him for what He's about to provide. Instead of worrying about how things will work out, you start believing that they already are. This mindset elevates your faith and silences the noise of doubt that tries to distract you. You begin to understand that God doesn't respond to panic, He responds to trust. He doesn't move because you fear the problem, He moves because you believe in His promise. Each time you speak to Him with assurance, you are declaring that your faith is bigger than your circumstances. You are reminding your heart that God has already made a way even if you haven't seen it yet. This alignment between your voice and God's promise positions you to receive from Him. It prepares your spirit to expect miracles instead of fearing challenges. Teaches you to stand firm even when the enemy tries to shake you. It builds a confidence inside you that whispers, God heard me and He will answer. This confidence is not arrogance, it is spiritual maturity. As you continue bringing your needs before God with boldness, you begin to feel a divine partnership forming. You realize you are not walking alone, praying alone, or fighting alone. You feel His presence with you, His strength around you, and His assurance within you. This awareness becomes your spiritual armor, protecting your mind from fear and your heart from discouragement. And with every prayer spoken from confidence rather than fear, you become more certain that your needs are not slipping through God's hands. You become more convinced that your provision is aligned with His timing. You become more secure in the truth that when you speak to Him with trust, heaven listens with intention, and your answers begin moving toward you. When financial challenges rise like mountains in front of you, it's as easy to feel small, overwhelmed, and unsure of how to move forward. But the moment you talk to God, you invite His strength into your weakness. What looked impossible begins to look conquerable. What felt like a dead end begins to feel like a pathway. You realize that you don't have to climb the mountain alone because God is the one who levels it, shifts it, or removes it entirely. His presence transforms what once felt heavy into something filled with divine purpose. Every challenge has a hidden purpose, even if you don't see it right away. Sometimes God uses difficult financial moments to stretch your faith, sharpen your vision, or teach you how to rely fully on Him. These challenges are not punishments, they are platforms. They are places where God prepares you for greater blessings and deeper trust. What seems like a setback is often a setup for something far greater than the immediate moment. When you bring your struggles to God, you begin to see the situation from a higher perspective. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You begin to ask, what is God preparing me for? This shift in thinking changes everything. You start understanding that your challenge is not meant to break you, but to build something stronger inside you. You realize that every pressure has purpose and every difficulty is shaping you for something you will need later. Unexpected bills, delayed income, sudden expenses, these moments often reveal the strength of your faith. They show you where you lean, who you trust, and how deeply you believe in God's ability to provide. When you talk to Him in these moments, you are not just seeking answers, you are developing resilience. You are building a spiritual strength that can survive storms and overcome burdens that once frightened you. Sometimes challenges come because you are doing something wrong, but because you are being positioned for something new. God may be guiding you toward a better opportunity, a wiser decision, or a stronger foundation for your life. He may be removing old patterns, opening new doors, or shifting you into a place where His provision can flow more freely. What feels like loss is often the beginning of a greater gain, but you only see it when you bring it to Him in prayer. When God steps into your financial challenges, He doesn't always remove them instantly, but He always walks through them with you. His presence becomes your peace. His guidance becomes your map. His strength becomes your anchor. You stop feeling helpless because you know you are not handling the situation alone. You begin to sense His direction in decisions, His comfort in pressure, and His wisdom in confusion. As you continue to talk to God during difficult times, you start seeing miracles you didn't expect. You notice opportunities showing up in unusual places. You notice favor opening doors that were once closed. You notice people stepping in with help, ideas, or support at just the right moment. These are not coincidences. They are signs that God is moving through your situation, shaping it into something better than you imagined. Your faith grows each time you witness God turning a challenge into a testimony. You begin to trust Him in ways you didn't before. You stop panicking over every bill and start believing in His timing. You stop stressing over delays and start expecting breakthroughs. You stop fearing problems and start seeing them as invitations for God to show His power in a new way. With each challenge that God helps you overcome, you become spiritually stronger. You gain experience, wisdom, and confidence. You no longer crumble under pressure because you had learned that pressure produces growth. You no longer fear financial storms because you know the one who calms them. You no longer walk in worry because you walk in the assurance that God has never failed you. And as you look back on every challenge that once scared you, you start to realize that each one became a stepping stone, a lesson, a testimony, and a reminder of God's unfailing ability to turn struggles into strength. Worry has a way of draining your strength long before any real problem arrives. It circles around your mind, steals your peace, and magnifies small concerns into heavy burdens. But the moment you shift from worrying to praying, everything inside you begins to settle. You invite God into the very place where anxiety once lived. You open the door for His presence to calm your heart, steady your thoughts, and remind you that you were never meant to face life depending only on your own strength. When you talk to God, worry loses its authority. It can no longer dictate how you think, how you sleep, or how you move through your day. Prayer interrupts the cycle of anxiety. It breaks the pattern of overthinking. It silences the voice that keeps repeating, "What if it doesn't work out?" and replaces it with a quiet assurance that whispers, "God is already working on it." You stop preparing for disaster and start preparing for God's solution. There is power in releasing your fears into God's hands. Every time you pray, you are handing over what you cannot control. You are surrendering what is too heavy, too confusing, too overwhelming for you to carry alone. This release is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is recognizing that worry has never solved a problem, but prayer has opened doors, moved mountains, and created breakthroughs when nothing else could. As you talk to God, His peace begins to fill the spaces where fear once lived. That peace doesn't always remove the problem instantly, but it removes the panic that tries to surround it. It gives you clarity where there was confusion. It gives you rest where there was restlessness. It gives you strength where there was exhaustion. This peace is not fragile or temporary. It becomes your shield as you face what comes next. The more you pray, the more you start to realize how many things God protects you from without you even knowing. You begin to see His fingerprints in your daily life, small moments of favor. Unexpected help, quiet solutions that appear at the perfect time. These moments show you that God is not distant. He is deeply involved in every detail. And worry begins to shrink because you recognize that you are not walking through life unprotected. Soon you start to understand that prayer does not just calm your heart, strengthens your spirit. It lifts you into a place where fear cannot fall. It trains your mind to think with faith rather than panic. It teaches you to respond with wisdom instead of reacting from fear. Worry becomes weaker because your trust becomes stronger. You begin to see life through the eyes of someone who knows God is in control. As you continue talking to God, you feel a shift in how you approach challenges. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, you feel supported. Instead of feeling alone, you feel accompanied. Instead of feeling unsure, you feel guided. You realize that God is not simply listening, He is leading. He is shaping your steps, aligning your path, and preparing you for answers that worry could never provide. Worry tells you to expect the worst, but prayer teaches you to expect God's best. It transforms fear into hope, doubt into assurance, and stress into strength. You begin to anticipate God's provision instead of fearing lack. You begin to expect solutions instead of focusing on obstacles. This shift in expectation is one of the greatest gifts prayer gives because it changes the way you see everything. You also begin to notice that when you stop feeding worry, it starves. It loses its influence. It loses its power to dictate your mood or your decisions. Prayer gives you the authority to push back against the negative voices that try to control you. It reminds you that your life is not governed by fear, but guided by God's grace. This realization becomes a turning point in your emotional and spiritual growth. And with every prayer you pray, you become more anchored, more grounded, and more confident in God's control. You realize that worry may come knocking, but it no longer gets to stay. Prayer becomes your defense, your strength, and your reminder that God is always working behind the scenes in ways you cannot yet see. When you speak to God with boldness, something powerful begins to shift around you. Your prayers stop sounding like fearful requests and start sounding like declarations of faith. You begin to feel a strength rising within you, a certainty that your needs are not ignored and your situation is not forgotten. The very act of speaking to God with confidence sends a signal to your spirit that help is already on the way. You stop begging and start believing, and that belief becomes the atmosphere where miracles begin to grow. There is a deep assurance that comes when you talk to God with expectation instead of hesitation. You don't wonder if He heard you. You know He did. You don't question whether He will come through. You trust that He is already preparing the answers. This expectation becomes your spiritual posture. It lifts your head, steadies your heart, and fills your mind with the calm. Certainty that God is moving long before you see the results in your hands. As you continue speaking to Him boldly, you begin to notice that your faith sharpens. You start recognizing His guidance in your decisions, His peace in your confusion, and His favor in moments when you least expected it. Your spiritual senses become more aware. You can feel when something is shifting. You can sense when doors are about to open. You know when God is leading you toward a provision that is perfectly timed and perfectly prepared for you. Confidence in prayer creates a ripple effect in every area of your life. You walk differently. You think differently. You stop letting fear and doubt control your reactions. Instead of panicking at every financial challenge, you remind yourself that you already spoke to God about it and that He is faithful to respond. This confidence allows you to face life with courage instead of dread, because you trust the one who walks ahead of you. You start to notice that your prayers carry a different weight. When you pray with boldness, they carry authority, they carry expectation, they carry conviction. You are no longer approaching God as someone unsure. You approach Him as someone who knows they are heard, loved, and supported by heaven. This assurance strengthens your inner world, quiets your fears, reminds you that you are connected to a source that never dries up. With every bold prayer, you begin to break the limitations that once held you back. You no longer see obstacles as permanent walls, but as temporary challenges that God can remove, shift, or transform. You stop underestimating what God can do. You stop shrinking under financial pressure. You stop assuming that you must handle everything alone. Your courage grows because you know God stands behind every word you speak in faith. Your confidence in prayer becomes a shield that protects your peace. When people around you panic, you remain steady. When situations turn uncertain, you remain anchored. When challenges arise unexpectedly, you don't fall apart because you already built a foundation rooted in trust. This foundation keeps you stable even when circumstances are unstable. It keeps you strong when the world tries to weaken you. As you continue to speak boldly to God, you realize that breakthrough doesn't always start with a miracle outside you. It often starts with a transformation inside you. Your mindset shifts. Your expectations rise. Your hope strengthens. You begin to see life from the perspective of someone who knows God intervenes at the perfect moment. This inner transformation becomes the first sign that something greater is coming. Every bold prayer becomes a step toward the future God has prepared for you. You are not just praying. You are advancing. You are moving forward in faith. You are positioning yourself to receive blessings that fear would have pushed away. You are creating space for God's provision, guidance, and miracles to show up in ways you couldn't produce on your own. And as you keep speaking to God with confidence, you develop an unshakable trust that your answers are not wandering or uncertain, but are already on their way with accuracy and divine timing, moving toward your life with power and purpose.